Once upon a time, in a faraway land surrounded by silver mountains and endless forests, there stood a magnificent castle of marble and gold. Its towers reached into the clouds, and from its highest balcony, one could see the valleys glowing beneath the morning sun. Within this castle lived a queen of extraordinary grace, beloved by her people, gentle to all creatures, and filled with dreams of motherhood. Though her kingdom was prosperous, her heart held one wish that no wealth could fulfill. She longed for a child, a daughter to love and to hold. One cold winter morning, the queen sat beside her window, sewing with delicate hands. Outside, snowflakes danced like tiny pearls, floating through the pale sunlight. As she worked, her needle pricked her finger, and 3 drops of red blood fell upon the pure white snow on the windowsill. She paused, gazing at the striking colors, white as purity, red as life, and black as the ebony frame of the window. A smile touched her lips as she whispered softly, "If only I could have a child whose skin is white as snow, whose lips are red as blood, whose hair is black as ebony, and whose heart is kind and true." And as if heaven had heard her prayer, her wish was granted. Months later, the queen gave birth to a daughter, a radiant baby girl whose beauty shone like morning light. Her skin was fair as snow, her hair black as polished ebony, and her lips the color of red cherries. They named her Snow White. And from the first moment she smiled, the hearts of everyone in the castle were filled with joy. But joy, as often in this world, walks hand in hand with sorrow. The good queen grew ill, and though the best physicians tried to save her, she knew her time was near. On her final night, she held her baby close and whispered, "Be brave, my child. Be kind, even when the world is not." With those words, she closed her eyes and drifted into eternal rest. The kingdom mourned deeply, and the king, broken by grief, fell silent for many years. Yet time moved forward, as it always does. When Snow White was still a little girl, the king remarried. The new queen was breathtakingly beautiful, but her beauty hid a cruel and envious heart. She owned a magic mirror, a gift from the dark mountains where strange powers whispered. Every morning she would stand before it and say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And the mirror, bound to speak only truth, would reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." Those words pleased her more than gold. She would smile at her reflection, pleased not by kindness or wisdom, but by the image of her own beauty. Under her reign, the castle changed. The once warm halls grew cold and silent. Servants moved like shadows, frightened of her temper. The king, weary and sick, left to settle disputes in distant lands, leaving Snow White behind under the care of her stepmother. Years passed. The little princess grew into a young woman of astonishing grace, her mother's gentleness shining through her in every gesture. She sang to the birds in the garden, tended the roses herself, and greeted everyone, highborn or humble, with a smile. Her beauty was not just in her face, but in her heart, and this, more than anything, made the queen's jealousy burn like fire. One morning, the queen asked her mirror the familiar question, her voice soft but dangerous. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" For years, the mirror had spoken the same words, but this time, its surface shimmered strangely, and the voice replied, "You, my queen, are beautiful indeed, but Snow White is the fairest one of all." A silence his heart ached. The next morning, he led Snow White deep into the forest, under the pretense of showing her a hidden meadow. As they walked beneath the dark trees, she gathered wildflowers and spoke of her dreams, unaware of the sorrow in his eyes. When they reached a lonely clearing, he drew his knife. But the sight of her innocence shattered his courage. He fell to his knees. "Forgive me, princess," he cried. "The queen has ordered your death. I cannot harm you. Run. Run far into the forest and never return." Tears welled in Snow White's eyes. She clasped his hand and whispered, "Thank you." Then, gathering her skirts, she fled into the woods, her heart pounding with fear. The forest was vast and shadowed, filled with the whisper of unseen creatures. Branches scratched her arms, owls hooted overhead, and strange eyes glimmered in the dark. Exhausted, she collapsed beneath a tree and wept until sleep claimed her. When morning light filtered through the leaves, she awoke to gentle chirping. Tiny animals, deer, squirrels, rabbits, and birds surrounded her. Their eyes were kind, their faces curious. Somehow, she felt they understood her sorrow. Following their lead, she came upon a small cottage hidden deep among the trees. It was quaint but messy. Dishes piled high, dust thick on the shelves, crumbs scattered on the table. Still, it felt safe. Snow White, ever gentle, decided to clean the place to repay its unseen owners. She swept the floor, washed the dishes, and cooked a little soup. Tired from her work, she lay down across a few of the small beds and fell fast asleep. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the owners returned. 7 dwarfs who worked each day in the nearby diamond mines. Singing cheerfully, they marched into their home, only to stop in astonishment. Everything was spotless, and something delicious simmered on the stove. "Who's been cleaning our house?" asked Ace, the eldest. "Maybe a ghost," said Clumsy, tripping over a stool. "Or a fairy," whispered Jolly. Curious, they tiptoed upstairs and found Snow White sleeping peacefully, her dark hair spilling over the tiny pillow. "She's beautiful," murmured one, "like a dream." When she stirred and opened her eyes, she gasped in surprise. But their faces were kind. "Please, don't be afraid," said Ace. "You're safe here." Snow White told them everything: the Wicked Queen, the huntsman, and her escape. The dwarfs listened with wide eyes. "Stay with us," they said together. "We'll protect you." And so, Snow White made her new home there. She cooked for them, sewed their clothes, and filled the cottage with laughter. Each morning, she kissed them goodbye as they left for the mines, and each evening, she welcomed them home with warm food and stories. But far away, the queen once again stood before her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And the mirror replied, "Snow White, who lives beyond the forest with the 7 dwarfs, is the fairest of them all." The queen's fury was beyond measure. "So she still lives," she hissed. "Then I shall destroy her myself." Using her dark magic, she disguised herself as an old peddler woman. Her back bent, her voice cracked, and her face wrinkled with deceit. Into her basket she placed a single red apple, half sweet, half poisoned. She journeyed through the woods until she reached the dwarf's cottage. Snow White was alone, humming as she baked bread. A knock sounded on the door. "Who's there?" she called. "Only a poor old woman," came the reply. "I sell apples to feed myself." "Please, my dear, won't you let me rest a while?" Remembering the dwarf's warning not to speak to strangers, Snow White hesitated. But pity overcame her caution. She opened the door. "Such a lovely girl," said the woman, smiling kindly. "Surely a bite of this apple will bring you strength." Snow White shook her head. "I cannot take anything from strangers." "Then watch me," said the woman. She took a bite from the untainted half and chewed it with a grin. "See?" Harmless Snow White, convinced, took the apple and bit into it. The sweetness lasted only a moment. Then her eyes closed, and she fell to the floor, still as marble. The queen laughed, a cold, echoing sound. "Now I am the fairest of them all." She vanished into the forest shadows. When the dwarfs returned that evening, they found Snow White lying motionless. They cried her name, but she did not stir. They wept through the night and built her a glass coffin so that her beauty could shine forever. They placed it upon a hill where the sun and moon would watch over her. Time passed. Flowers grew around her, birds sang above her, and yet she slept, a perfect, eternal dream. One day, a young prince rode through the forest. He saw the glimmering coffin and stopped. When he looked inside, his heart trembled. "It is she," he whispered, "the girl I saw once by the river, whose face haunted my dreams." He begged the dwarfs to let him take her to his castle. Moved by his sincerity, they agreed. But as his men lifted the coffin, one stumbled, and the jolt loosened the piece of poisoned apple in her throat. Snow White gasped, a soft breath of life, and her eyes fluttered open. The prince fell to his knees. "You live. You are safe." Snow White smiled weakly. "Have I been dreaming?" "No," he said softly. "You have awakened to love." When news of her survival reached the castle, the wicked queen rushed to her mirror in terror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror answered, "Snow White, the true queen of kindness, is fairest of them all." The queen's rage shattered her own heart, and the mirror cracked with it. From that day, she was never seen again. Snow White returned home, reunited with her father, and forgave all who had wronged her. She and the prince were married in a grand celebration. The 7 dwarfs stood proudly beside her, their eyes glistening with joy. Bells rang through the kingdom, music filled the air, and the land, once shadowed by envy, bloomed again. And so, the girl with skin as white as snow, lips as red as roses, and hair as black as ebony lived happily ever after, ruling her kingdom with grace, mercy, and love. For true beauty, as her mother once whispered, is not in mirrors or crowns, but in the goodness of a heart that forgives. The end.